Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright, for today's Industry Insight, we'll return to the topic of re-reviewing games. We talked about this one, I think it was last year, as a critical thought, but there's always new discussions to be had, and we can put this under the Industry Insight vlog playlist. So, re-reviewing games has become a big discussion regarding titles that have undergone massive changes post-release. We're not talking about games that changed during early access or from crowdfunding to beta, stuff like that, but when games after hitting 1.0 in the months or sometimes even weeks after have gone over massive changes after the big reviewing period. As we talked about before, when it comes to the video game industry, the bulk of your sales will probably be within the first few weeks, at most a month to 2 months after release. Now, that can be a little bit different if we're talking about early access games. But generally speaking, the first 60 to 90 days, 30 to 60 days after your game was released, is where you're going to be making the bulk of your money and where the majority of people are going to be looking at your title. Be it consumers, YouTubers slash streamers, and of course reviewers slash journalists. And this is when the impressions of your game are going to make or break it. If people have problems with it, they're going to notate that down and it's going to come back and bite you with review scores. But we have seen cases where developers have gone the extra mile in one way or another to keep supporting a game beyond launch. And we're not just talking about things like new levels or new supplementary content that adds to the experience, but complete redesigns or brand new systems that dramatically change the game. For instance, Renowned Explorers, with its first expansion, with a second one due out soon by the time of this recording, added in a brand new system for campaign progression in terms of upgrading your characters. Supreme Commander 2, after having a very brutal review period, after about, I think it was like 6 months to a year post-release, it had undergone a massive change, including new AI, rebalancing all the text, and just making the game a completely different title to play. And then there's, of course, games that have kind of had like a redemption period in a sense. We talked about Skyshine's Bedlam last time, where following the train wreck in terms of reviews after its release, the developer kept with it and just completely gutted the game and rebuilt it from top to bottom. Another example lately has been the news I've been hearing out of the game Brigador, which I spoke to the developer about that last year, and we talked about how much of a strain and a challenge it was building that game. And I just want to quickly pull up what they were talking about with it. Yeah, so they're going to be doing some massive changes to it, and this is another way of getting more interest. And then the other one that I want to talk about, which, as a very funny point, I completely forgot the name of this game, and then I spent about 10 minutes before recording this going very slowly down my Steam list of over 1,000 games to see if I could find it. And it is Halcyon 6, Star-Based Commander. I did a review and spotlights of this game when it first came out of early access a few months ago. And since that time, the developers have been really hard at work, not just with, fixing bugs and such, but adding in completely new systems. They've added in ways of automating processes on the map, ways of personalizing and customizing your officers, which are kind of like your hero units, and more. And the thing is that these are changes, and with the other examples, that again aren't just supplemental or adding more. They are in a lot of cases completely changing the game from what it was at launch. And in these cases, it's also changing the review perception. Because if someone reviewed the game and the complaint was there wasn't enough content, and now that's gone, then that review is no longer valid. And again, we can see this especially in the MMO and free-to-play market. Again, Hearthstone now is a vastly different game than Hearthstone at launch. Same goes for even stuff like StarCraft. The infamous Diablo example we talked about in the Dissecting Design, and how patch 2.0 just almost like completely revitalized that game and turned things around. And of course, MMOs as well. I'm sure anyone who's been playing World of Warcraft over the years knows that it is a far different game now than it was 5 years, or who am I kidding, 10 or maybe 14 years ago. But this does raise this question. Is there a point when you should re-review a game? For better or for worse? Because we've seen games where new additions have made things worse. Now, those examples are fewer and far between, thankfully, but it does raise this point. If the game at launch is a completely different title than it was now, is it worthy enough of being re-reviewed? And is it fair to dock a game for changing things? Another big example of this, of course, is Payday 2, and we've talked about this one as well. Payday 2 has undergone massive foundational changes to its design over the last, I guess we're approaching 3 years now. New skill trees, new forms of progression. They just recently added in armor skins, microtransactions, a new game mode, new characters, heists, and I could sit here and go on for the next 4 or 5 minutes. But again, this is a completely different game than it was back at launch. And this does raise that interesting question. This is kind of an aside, but I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think about games that undergo massive structural changes over the years? Again, this is a game that, if it was like this at the start, it's now completely different, or different enough that it's not the same experience. I brought up the example of Team Fortress 2 on previous occasions, but as anyone knows, Team Fortress 2 now is very different than Team Fortress 2 back during the Orange Box days. Now, there are arguments that it's gotten better in some aspects, and sometimes worse in others, but we start talking about that. That's another 15-20 minutes possibly. But the point stands. How much does a game have to change, or should it have to change, to warrant a re-review? I think I just may have a slur there a little bit, I'm sorry. And again, we're not talking about expansions or DLC along those lines, as in a new product that adds content. A good case in point would be the difference between XCOM Enemy Unknown and Enemy Within. Enemy Within added a lot of changes to the structure of the game, but this was priced as DLC or an expansion. So this is something that was expected and kept separate if you didn't buy it. But in the case that we're talking about, these are developers changing the base foundation of their game through patches. In many cases, the consumers didn't ask for this. This is just the developer either trying to right a wrong or simply keep a game going. And again, this is not an easy question to be had, because the video game industry is probably the only industry that really does this. You don't see movies get re-reviewed upon, the theatrical release versus the DVD. Yes, there may be bonus scenes, but it's not like we're getting a completely different movie. Same goes for cars and any kind of product. If there's a new version, they'll just, rebrand it. Everyone's favorite, Pepsi Clear, Pepsi Crystal, Diet Coke Zero, and all that. But with video games, as we've talked about, you only get one chance to make an impact on the market with the game. If that game fails, you're going to be really left behind the 8 ball. And in many cases, that can doom a game in a studio. Now, when it comes to this kind of extra work, many consumers see this, again, as kind of a redemption play. A chance for the developer to make right by their fans. In some cases, it still hasn't really been recorded yet if these changes have done enough to turn around bad sales or bad word of mouth. And again, that goes back to our topic, because if they did change the game enough, then it could warrant a re-review, which means it'll get back into the public eye and hopefully improve sales. But again, this is not an easy question. Because as we are talking, I always like to make this little joke here, but as you're watching this video right now, you are listening to me talk, there's probably been 5 to 10 games released as of this day. And again, it doesn't matter what the day it is. And it becomes very hard to keep track of this. I remember a few months ago when I was trying to decide what game to stream or record next, and one of my friends made a good point. Do you want to look at a game that has gone, its time is done? Or do you want to look at something new and draw interest to your channel and your site? Again, I have to go with what's new. It will be great to replay all my old and classic games, and with the Dissecting Designs, that gives me a chance, along with the Modern Retro playlist. But again, how can I'm barely having enough time to dedicate to new games, and that's not even going to include any games that has gone over those massive patches. But if the game has changed enough to warrant it, or changed completely different, then it should be up to a game journalist or to reviewers to take another crack at it. But again, how do you find the time, and more importantly, what is the break-even point? What is the line that has to cross in order for a game to warrant that? Is it enough for a developer to change one system or fix bugs? Polygon, for instance, has done their provisional reviews where they'll just keep re-reviewing a title as they keep playing it. But I think that's kind of disingenuous, because a game shouldn't be changing that much over the course of an 8 to 10 hour play. We're talking about games that change over months, and maybe even sometimes even years. And there's also another topic that relates to this, with the idea of reviewing early access games, but that, my friends, is too big for today. So, to wrap things up, I do think that games, in some cases, can warrant a re-review. But we're talking about extreme situations. Again, something like Skyshine's Bedlam to its re-release, Supreme Commander 2 to its, I think it was like a year after patch, or even something like Payday 2 after, from launch to 3 years from now. But it does again raise some very interesting questions. Is it fair to mark a game down that has been severely changed? Even if your first review of the game and you gave it an 8 and you loved it, and then after patches and such is now like a 6 or 5, it does seem like a very interesting situation to put the reviewer in. And then, like we said, how much does a game need to change? And more importantly, here's the other fun part. If we open up the door to re-reviews, what about re-reviews? Where we just keep looking at a game every year or so to see what's been going on with it. Again, this opens up a very big rabbit hole, or we're going down the rabbit hole in terms of discussions. But I'm curious for you folks, have you ran into any examples other than ones that I've mentioned where a game has undergone massive changes, enough to warrant changing a review or your perception of it? And for you developers watching this, what do you think about this prospect of continuing to work on a game and changing it in such a structural or foundational way? We do need to talk or have an industry insight about the decision or the work that goes into post-release support, but that will have to be for another day. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. As always, if you're enjoying these pieces and you're new, be sure to like and subscribe, and if you have a suggestion for a future topic, please let me know. But otherwise, check back daily for more great discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.